As a basketball player, the sound of the swish, the dribble on the concrete floor, and the sounds of squeaky shoes are my happy place. Some people might like hockey, football, soccer, or whatever sport you'd like to play. Sport is beneficial for mental health, as 10% to 20% of non-athletes are more likely to develop mental health conditions, as well as the development of important characteristics that would be helpful for personality growth. And sport activates the social and competitive nature in all of us. So why would Indigenous athletes, whether children playing on an unorganized team to professional Indigenous players, face racism even in a place where they find themselves happy playing the sport? Why would they be excluded for the reason of being dirty Indians or lazy Indians? Children are being discriminated against during games. Therefore, this discourages them from participating in these games due to associating this hate with the sport. Every child, adult, and senior should feel safe practicing their preferred physical activity in a team where they don't feel excluded, but on the contrary, feel included. The history of lacrosse dates back to when the First Nations were observed playing the game of lacrosse back in the 17th century by European settlers. The Algonquin people named it Bagataway, while the Iroquois nation called it Tawarathon. The First Nations played the game for their creator, as it was a way for them to show their gratitude to the Great Spirit. When the French settlers saw the sport and found it entertaining, they gave it a new name, lacrosse. Crozier means cross in French. The lacrosse sport is played by the Indigenous peoples as a way to honor the Creator for the gift He gave them, which is the sport. For them, it is a ritual, a medicine, a tradition, a culture, and an identity. When babies are first born, they are given lacrosse sticks as a symbol of honor, which they're told to keep safe. During the first week of September, the Iroquois Nationals lacrosse team was finally given a chance to compete at the Lacrosse World Games in 2022. This didn't come very easy though. The team was initially excluded from the World Games due to them not meeting the criteria. The team's sovereignty and passport was apparently the biggest barrier and a deal breaker to the World Lacrosse front office and officials. In 2018, the Iroquois Nationals lacrosse team faced travel delays on their way to compete in the World Lacrosse Championships in Israel while traveling on Haudenosaunee Confederacy passports. In 2010, they were denied entry into the United Kingdom. That doesn't mean that they should be excluded. This game is their origin, their culture, and their way of healing, and they deserve to represent the Haudenosaunee Confederacy by playing the sport that their ancestors invented. Despite ranking third in the competition, while some teams were well below that ranking, the Ireland team gave up their eligibility to include the Iroquois Nationals, and they were ranked 12th in the competition, despite their inclusion. It took everyone to stand up against the system. It took a team that had courage, dignity, and the feeling of responsibility to give up their eligibility so that the World Lacrosse officials could include the inventor of this game to play in the 2022 World Games. Without the Ireland lacrosse team, the World Lacrosse Games would have been played without the Iroquois national team.
What is your story?
I was playing against the Red Deer College Queens when we were battling the puck in the corner, and girls chirp in hockey too, like we are pretty at it, but it's never crossed any type of line, going back and forth for a bit. And after the whistle, she got up and she looked at me and she said, "Shut up, you dirty very strongly about this." So I knew immediately. I went and told my teammates, I told the ref, I told my coach during the game. The girl came and apologized after the game, but we went through all the precautions to go and forward it to the league so they can deal with it. And they just said that she said sorry and that's good enough. No game suspension until I pushed for it, until I brought it to the news, until I got a conversation about it going.
How did you feel when she said that to you?
hurt. I honestly couldn't believe it. It's 2020. I couldn't believe that that's something I still had to go through. It made me sad, mostly because if it's still happening now, I can't even imagine if it's happening to like little kids across the nation, you know?
I think I was 11 or 10. I was playing on a spring team with the Mallard Stars. We were an all Indigenous hockey team. We kind of gathered up a bunch of kids from different reserves all around Manitoba, and we'd go into different spring tournaments and, showcase our skills and kind of show that, we're obviously really good hockey players. We were a good team. And so it started off first shift of the game. There was a crazy hit from behind, kind of started a little brawl there. And I guess I knew some of the players on the team. I knew their coaches. And, obviously me not really looking, some people might not see me as an Indigenous person, but which I am. My dad's from Fanning Bay First Nation. My mom's from Mississippi Cree Nation. It started a big brawl, and I was kind of frustrated already. I grabbed the puck and shot it, and I didn't really mean to shoot at anyone. I didn't hit anyone. I kind of just, missed a bit. And so the ref right there kicked me out. And while I'm skating off the ice, the parents and the coaches on the other team are kind of like leaning over the bench, yelling at me like, "You don't deserve to be on this all Indian team, a bunch of dirt, they're all from the res, like that's not you, you're not them." And like right there, like that's, I'm an 11-year-old, 10-year-old kid hearing that from coaches and on the other team. And when I'm skating off the ice, I'm hearing parents say, go back to the res and all that. So, we just ended up forfeiting that game. We didn't want to play. We let the other team win. In the dressing room, we had a big, long talk about, some people don't like to see our type of people, be good at something, and they'll do whatever they can to, stop us from doing it.
These players aren't the only Indigenous people who have faced racism when playing visiting teams. There are many stories of Indigenous players who have faced racism while playing sports. 2 years ago, a First Nation Elite Bantam 888 team was subjected to racist taunts and slurs at a Quebec City tournament. During the tournament, players were being called savages, and they were also subjected to opposing players mimicking a stereotypical war cry on the ice, and players mocking the motion of a tomahawk as the First Nations players passed them near the dressing room of the ice.
He calls that little hit. He calls it again. A little hit like that. Wow, look at what they're doing to our boys. Look. 4 in the penalty box. This is how they beat us. Gang de sauvage. Gang de racistes. Oh oui. Raciste, gang de sauvage, he says, this guy. Look. This guy. That's what he says. Gang de sauvage, he says. Gang de sauvage. Gang de racistes.
When the players would go to the referees, they would dismiss them and simply tell them to go back to the blue line as if they had done something wrong. The DJ played powwow music to mock the Indigenous people, and several spectators told them to go home. These types of actions are what make children want to quit the sport that they found comfort in. 84% of children in Canada, they don't identify as Indigenous play sports. Yet, 69% of Indigenous children play sports. It might not strike as a big difference once you analyze it, but where's the equality? Why is there even a difference? Why would the coach have to tell his players you're going to face this racism for the rest of your lives? Every child, regardless of race, gender, or social status, should have a right to play and socialize with everyone without feeling threatened or ashamed of their culture. Sports are supposed to unite us, not drift us apart. Indigenous people have been demanding help and the rights that they're supposed to have in physical activity and access to sports since the history of the beginning of Canada. The most recent demand was in the Sport and Reconciliation in 2015. They demanded and called upon all levels of government in collaboration with Aboriginal peoples, sports, halls of fame, and other relevant organizations to provide public education that tells the national story of Aboriginal athletes in history. as well as calling upon the federal government to amend the Physical Activity and Sport Act to support reconciliation by ensuring that policies to promote physical activity as a fundamental element of health and well-being, reduce barriers to sports participation, increase the pursuit of excellence in sport, and build capacity in the Canadian sport system, including the Aboriginal people. We call upon the officials and host countries of international sporting events such as the Olympics, Pan Am, and Commonwealth Games to ensure that Indigenous peoples' territorial protocols are respected and local Indigenous communities are engaged in all aspects of planning and participating in such events. On the contrary, we saw the opposite thing happen when the Iroquois Nationals were excluded from the World Games of lacrosse until they were finally included when the Irish team stepped down from the game, that showed an act of sportsmanship. So what does this say about them asking for their rights, asking for simple things that everyone else has? But then, at the end of the day, the opposite happens. The Iroquois Nationals face racism. They don't get included. The children who go to tournaments in Quebec City get taunts and racist cheers against them. So what does this say about the history of Canada? What does this say about the extent of racism in Canada? This says that Canada has deep systemic roots of racism. The deep racism in the system can only be removed if we all stand up, as we saw how the Irish national lacrosse team stood up for the Iroquois Nation. So let's stand up. If the government won't, we all could. Let's raise our voice. Let's make ourselves heard.